Right now, I want to walk you through this project here. I'm going to show you how I paint furniture. So this will work for any kind of furniture that you're painting, but this specifically was for these two wooden chairs. So here's kind of the star of the show. I used this HVLP paint sprayer. I didn't use any brushes, so that was really nice. I used this liquid sandpaper. I used this primer here. It's Kills 2. I use this primer just because it's what I had on hand and I just wanted to get it used up. For my paint, I use this Krylon. It's this tintable paint with a chalky finish. So this is the matte, so I didn't want any glossy look to it. And this one we tinted dark gray. It comes white. You can tint it whatever color you want. And then the top coat here, I use this Minwax polyacrylic. This one is water-based, and I used that because the finish over time, if you use a oil-based polyurethane, it can actually yellow over time, especially if it's in a lot of sunlight. And this water-based polyacrylic protects your finish, but it also doesn't yellow over time, so that's why I elected to use that. Now let me kind of walk you through the project. So for this chair, I actually sanded it down. I used a 120 grit sandpaper and then finished with a 220 grit sandpaper. Then I went ahead and primed this chair. For this chair, I actually just used this liquid sandpaper. Now, liquid sandpaper is great for furniture for removing the old gloss. So this chair was just wood. It wasn't painted or anything, but it did have a finish on it, like a polyurethane or a polyacrylic. And so I used this liquid sandpaper to remove that glossy finish so that my new paint would bond and stick to it better. So for both of these chairs, I used the Kills 2 primer. I sprayed it on. Now I did have to thin this down in order to get it to spray in the paint sprayer. It's about a 25 or 30% ratio that I did have to thin it down. So I used about 70% of the paint and then added about 30% water. This is a water-based paint, so I was able to just add water to thin it down. Sprayed on, sprayed very well. I did about 2 coats of that for both of these chairs. And then I went with my color paint, the Krylon chalky finish tintable paint. This is the matte again because I didn't want a glossy finish to it. I just wanted a flat finish. Now again, I did have to thin this one down, pretty much the same ratio. I think this was a little bit less though. I only had to do about 25% water and then 75% paint. Thinned down really easily. It sprayed very nicely on both of these chairs and it looks like it's bonding really well. 2 coats of this paint for both chairs, and then I had to do a little third coat just to kind of touch up some spots that I missed a little bit on these chairs. So 2.5, maybe 3 coats of this, kind of just depends on how good a coverage you get the first time. And then finally on both of these, I finished here with the polyacrylic. Again, it's water-based, so I didn't have to thin this one down. If I did, I would have just used water, but this actually comes thin enough that it went straight into the sprayer and then I was able to spray the coat on. Now I did elect to just do 1 coat of this polyacrylic. Now I could do 2 or 3 and typically I do depending on the project. If I was doing something like a wood stain that was going to be like a kitchen table or something, I definitely would do more coats of this, but these chairs actually aren't going to be used that much, so I just did 1 coat. Now let's kind of compare the two because I use different processes for both of this. So for this one, the sanded one, it actually feels like a harder finish. This feels more like a wood material. This one over here almost kind of has a rubbery, kind of sticky finish to it. Not saying that it is sticky. It's kind of just the best way that I can describe it. You know how rubber kind of sticks or grips to your hand a little bit? It just has a little bit more of that kind of feeling to it. Now one thing I did notice is that you can see a bit more of the kind of the wood grain here on this chair here. So if I was doing it again, with that in mind, next time I sand my furniture before I paint it, I'm just going to make sure that I get a better sanding finish. It's kind of around here on the back of the chair. I've got a kind of an odd pattern here with the sandpaper. So I would just kind of smooth that out next time because you can pick it up here when you're looking at the finish here, just kind of the different streaks there. I was going this way with the sandpaper and then this way. I'd be a little bit more uniform with the sandpaper and then finish with a little bit finer grit sandpaper just to kind of smooth everything out a little bit better. I'm still really happy with how it finished. However, just something I would make note of for my next project. Now this one here with the liquid sandpaper, I'm having kind of the same issue here. So when I was doing the liquid sandpaper, you put it on a rag here and you go in a circular motion and you can kind of pick it up here. So you can see these kind of movements here, and that's where I was wiping it with the towel And when it dries, the liquid sandpaper, it's a deglosser, so it almost melts that old finish on there. So that top coat that was on there, it kind of dissolves and it leaves this hazy look to it. And sometimes it's almost tacky when you touch it. And so you kind of see that there. So in the future, when I'm doing that again, using the liquid sandpaper, I'll keep that in mind. And my final pattern, I'll kind of go with the wood grain so that it finishes a little bit different and it's not as noticeable. Overall, still really hard to notice, and you do have to get close up to it, and you really have to kind of be looking for it. Now the finish, the durability, I'm doing kind of a light to medium scratch test here. I don't want to actually damage the paint. I know that I could if I wanted to. I've painted enough furniture and tried so many different ways to do it with sanding and liquid sandpaper and all that stuff that you can always damage it if you want to, but you just don't want it to damage super easily. So both of these, I would say, have about the same durability of finish, and that, might come into play depending on your project and how much time you want to spend. So of course, sanding is going to take more time just because it's a longer process. The liquid sandpaper could save you a few minutes, maybe not a ton of time, but it could save you a little bit of time and effort, because of course that is much easier than sanding everything. Overall, I am very happy with how they both turned out. And my next project's gonna be kind of difficult because I'm gonna have to kind of pick and choose whether I want to sand or just use the liquid sandpaper. I think actually both processes are fine, and you would probably be happy with your results on either one. Hopefully that was helpful. Now I do have a complete tutorial on this HVLP paint spray. If you've never used one before, you should check that video out next. If you like DIY around the house, please subscribe and check out some other videos. My name is Drew. I'll see you in the next one.